The shields flickered again, and Elder Chitin Sage felt his heart sink deeper into despair. 3 months had passed since the Kresh warships had arrived in orbit above their peaceful colony on Kepler 442b. 3 months of constant bombardment, dwindling supplies, and prayers that went unanswered across the vast emptiness of space. He stood in the communications center, his 6 legs trembling with exhaustion. Around him, other Velans worked frantically at their stations, their chitinous exoskeletons dull from stress and lack of proper nutrition. The Velans had never been warriors. They were miners, terraformers, and farmers. Their entire civilization had been built on the principle of harmony with nature and peaceful coexistence with all living beings. That philosophy had served them well for thousands of years, until the Kresh Dominion had discovered their little colony. Communications Officer Vespa turned to face him, her antennae drooping with defeat. "Elder, I have sent distress signals to every known civilization in this sector. The assembled councils have acknowledged our transmission but declined to intervene. The Morvani Empire says we are too far from their territory. The Silicon Collective calculates that protecting us offers no strategic advantage." Chitin Sage clicked his mandibles in frustration. "And the others?" "Silent, Elder, all of them silent." Another explosion rocked the facility. Dust fell from the ceiling as the shield generators whined with the strain of deflecting yet another plasma barrage. The Kresh were patient predators. They did not need to destroy the colony. They simply needed to wait until the shields failed and the Velans were too weak to resist. Then they would descend, place collars around every Velan neck, and drag them off to labor camps across the Dominion. Chitin Sage had heard the stories. Entire species enslaved, their cultures erased, their children raised to serve Kresh masters. He would die before he let that happen to his people, but death seemed the only option left. "Expand the broadcast range," he said quietly. "Send the distress signal on every frequency we can generate. Someone, somewhere, must have the courage to help." Vespa hesitated. "Elder, if we use that much power, we will drain the emergency reserves. The medical bay will lose life support within hours. Do it anyway. If no one comes, the medical bay will not matter." Vespa bowed her head and began adjusting the communications array. Within moments, the entire facility dimmed as massive amounts of power were diverted to the transmitter. The distress signal, containing their location, their situation, and their desperate plea for help, shot out into space in all directions, touching frequencies that most civilized species had abandoned centuries ago. Hours passed, then days. The Kresh continued their assault, seemingly amused by the Velan's determination to survive. Commander Thraka, the leader of the Kresh fleet, had even sent a mocking message offering terms of surrender. The Velans would be worked only 12 hours per day if they submitted peacefully. They would be fed adequate rations. Their children would not be separated from their parents for at least 5 years. Chitin Sage had not bothered to respond. On the 7th day after the expanded broadcast, Vespa suddenly straightened at her console, her antennae standing straight up in surprise. "Elder, we have received a response." Chitin Sage rushed to her station as fast as his exhausted legs could carry him. "Who? Which civilization?" Vespa's mandibles clicked in confusion as she studied the data. "I do not know, Elder. The signal identifies itself as coming from something called the Earth Expeditionary Force. I have searched our entire database. There is no record of any species or civilization called Earth. Play the message." The communications console crackled with static. Then a voice emerged. It was strange, neither too deep nor too high, with an odd rhythmic quality that the Velans had never heard before. The translation software struggled for a moment before rendering the words in Velan language. Message received. Earth Expeditionary Force en route to your position. Hold your position and maintain shields if possible. Estimated time of arrival, 47 hours. Repeat, help is coming. Hold on. The communications center fell silent. Every Velan stopped working and stared at the console as if it might suddenly explain this impossible development. Earth? Chitin Sage whispered. Search every galactic database. I want to know who these beings are. The next hours were a flurry of research activity. The Velans discovered that Earth was a small planet, in an isolated spiral arm of the galaxy, far from any major trade routes or political centers. The dominant species there called themselves humans, and they had only achieved faster-than-light travel about a century ago. What they found in the limited records was deeply troubling. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, chasing their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Their planet had been racked by countless wars, and they had nearly destroyed themselves with weapons of terrifying power. Even their own history records showed that they had committed atrocities against their own kind, dividing themselves by arbitrary characteristics and fighting over resources, beliefs, and territory. "Elder," Vespa said nervously, "are we certain we want these humans to come? They seem very violent." Chitin Sage looked at the shield readouts. They were down to 20% capacity. "We have no choice. If they do not come, we will all be slaves by tomorrow evening." But privately, Chitin Sage wondered if they were simply trading one monster for another. What did these humans want? Why would they travel across hostile space to help a species they had never met? Nothing in galactic politics suggested that anyone did anything without expecting something valuable in return. The Kresh intercepted the human transmission as well. Commander Thraka reviewed the message with his officers, and their reaction was loud, mocking laughter. "Humans?" Thraka growled, his scales rippling with amusement. "I have never heard of them." "Have any of you?" His intelligence officer checked the military databases. "Commander, Earth is a minor world in Sector 447. They have no significant military presence on record. No territorial disputes. No trade agreements. They are galactic nobodies. How many ships could such a worthless species possibly send? 2? 3? Unknown, Commander. But logic suggests they cannot field a significant force. They have no allies, no resources, no experience in galactic conflict." Thraka leaned back in his command chair, his tail swishing with satisfaction. "Then we will crush these foolish humans along with the Velans. It will be a valuable lesson to any other species that considers interfering with Kresh expansion. Increase bombardment intensity. I want those shields down before these humans arrive." Below, in the colony, Chitin Sage gathered his people in the central assembly hall. Hundreds of Velans looked up at him with desperate hope in their multifaceted eyes. "My friends," he began, his voice amplified throughout the chamber, "I will not lie to you. I do not know if the beings who answered our call are saviors or simply different predators. But they answered when no one else would. They are coming when the entire galaxy abandoned us. For that reason alone, I choose to hope." The Velans clicked their mandibles in agreement, the sound filling the hall like rain on metal. 47 hours, Chitin Sage continued. "We must survive for 47 more hours. Keep the shields active. Ration what remains, and pray to whatever forces govern this universe that we have not simply invited a different kind of doom." As the Velans dispersed to their duties, Chitin Sage returned to the communications center. He looked up through the transparent dome at the stars beyond, where Kresh warships circled like carrion birds. Somewhere out there, humans were coming. The question that haunted him was simple. Would they arrive as heroes or as something far worse? Commander Thraka stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Endless Hunger, watching the countdown timer with cold satisfaction. 36 hours remained until these mysterious humans were supposed to arrive. The Velan shields would fail long before then. His claws tapped rhythmically against the armrest of his command throne as he studied the bombardment patterns on the tactical display. The shields protecting the colony were flickering more frequently now, their energy signature weakening with each passing hour. Victory was inevitable, as it always was when the Kresh Dominion set their sights on prey. The bridge doors hissed open, and his intelligence officer approached with the quick, nervous steps of someone bearing potentially unwelcome news. "Commander, I have completed the full database search on these humans you requested, and Earth is located in what most civilizations consider the galactic backwater. The planet itself is unremarkable. Standard gravity, oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, abundant water. The humans achieved faster-than-light capability approximately 80 years ago." Thraka snorted. 80 years? We have waste disposal units older than their space program. What kind of military could they possibly possess? That is the curious part, Commander. There are almost no records of human military activity in galactic space. No territorial conflicts, no trade disputes, no mercenary contracts. They appear to have remained completely isolated since achieving FTL travel. Isolated? Thraka's eyes narrowed. By choice or by rejection? Unknown, Commander. The few species that have encountered humans describe them as strange. They ask many questions but offer little about themselves. They trade rarely and refuse most diplomatic overtures. Thraka considered this. In his experience, species that isolated themselves did so for one of two reasons. They were either too weak to compete with galactic powers, or they were hiding something. Given that humans were traveling across hostile space to help strangers, weakness seemed unlikely. What of their biology? Their capabilities? The intelligence officer brought up a holographic display showing a human figure. Thraka studied it with growing confusion. The creature stood upright on only 2 legs, had no scales or natural armor, no claws worth mentioning, and appeared disturbingly fragile. They are carbon-based, warm-blooded, with internal skeletons. Their homeworld has high gravity by galactic standards, which has made them physically stronger than their appearance suggests. However, they lack natural weapons or defenses. Their skin is easily damaged. Then how have they survived as a species? Tool use, Commander. Advanced tool use. Humans apparently evolved as persistence hunters. They would chase prey for days until the animal collapsed from exhaustion, then kill it with weapons. Their biology allows them to run for extremely long periods without rest. Thraka laughed, a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the bridge. They are marathon runners, not warriors. How many ships are they sending to die for these worthless Velans? Unknown, Commander. However, given their limited galactic presence and recent spacefaring status, I estimate no more than 5 vessels, likely scout-class or light frigates. And we have 12 warships, including 3 heavy cruisers. Thraka's tail lashed with pleasure. This will be over quickly. When the humans arrive, destroy them immediately. Leave 1 ship crippled but intact. I want survivors to bring word back to Earth about what happens when primitive species interfere with the Kresh Dominion. Deep in the Velan colony, Elder Chitin Sage had made a disturbing discovery. One of his researchers had found an old data file from a trade consortium that had briefly dealt with humans 40 years ago. The file contained an observation that made his antenna twitch nervously. The humans, the file read, are unlike any species we have encountered. They form emotional attachments to beings outside their own kind. During negotiations, one of their diplomats stopped the proceedings to rescue a small mammal that had become trapped in the ventilation system. When asked why they would delay important business for a creature of no intelligence, the human seemed confused by the question. It was suffering, the human said, as if that explained everything. Chitin Sage read the passage 3 times. In his experience, species helped others for strategic gain, resource acquisition, or mutual defense pacts. The concept of helping simply because another being was suffering was alien to galactic politics. Either humans were naive fools who would soon be extinct, or they operated by principles that the galaxy had forgotten long ago. He did not have long to ponder this mystery. Vespa burst into his chamber, her antennae vibrating with excitement and terror. Elder, the humans have arrived. What? But they are not due for another 34 hours. They are here now, Elder. They have dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. Chitin Sage rushed to the command center, his heart's pounding. On the main display, sensors showed the impossible. The human fleet consisted of 47 warships of various sizes. The largest vessels were massive, nearly twice the size of Kresh heavy cruisers. The smaller ones moved in tight formations around the larger ships like protective offspring. 47 ships, for a species that supposedly had no military presence in the galaxy. For strangers they had never met. For a colony that could offer them nothing in return. Aboard the Endless Hunger, chaos erupted on the bridge. Alarms blared as the sensor displays updated with the new contact information. Commander, the tactical officer shouted. I count 47 human vessels, frigate class to dreadnought class. They are forming a battle formation and advancing toward our position. Thraka stared at the display, his mind racing. This was wrong. This was all wrong. New spacefaring species did not possess this kind of military capability. They did not send fleets this large to protect aliens they had never met. Battle stations, he roared. All ships prepare for combat. We may be outnumbered, but we are Kresh. We have conquered 100 worlds and enslaved 50 species. These soft-skinned apes will learn the price of challenging us. The human fleet continued its advance, and then a message broadcast across all frequencies in perfectly translated Kresh language. Kresh Dominion Forces. This is Rear Admiral Chen of the Earth Expeditionary Force. You are currently in violation of Sapient Rights Protocol, Article 7, which prohibits aggressive military action against non-hostile civilian populations. You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. You have 1 hour to comply. Failure to withdraw will be interpreted as hostile intent, and we will respond accordingly. Thraka's scales flushed dark red with rage. Sapient Rights Protocol? There is no such protocol. They are inventing laws. His intelligence officer checked the databases frantically. Commander, they are correct. The Sapient Rights Protocol was established 200 years ago by the Galactic Assembly. Article 7 does indeed prohibit what we are doing. However, enforcement has been selective and many species ignore it. Selective enforcement means it is not a real law, Thraka growled. It is a suggestion, and the Kresh Dominion does not take suggestions from anyone. He opened a channel to the human fleet, his voice dripping with contempt. Admiral Chen, this is Commander Thraka of the Kresh Dominion. You have no authority here. This system is unclaimed territory, and these Velans are legitimate salvage. Furthermore, you are outnumbered. I have 12 warships crewed by the finest warriors in the galaxy. Return to your pathetic little world before we add Earth to our list of conquests. There was a long pause before the human admiral responded. When the voice came through again, it had changed. The diplomatic formality was gone, replaced by something cold and hard. Commander Thraka, let me explain something to you. We traveled 9 days through hostile space to get here. We brought 47 warships, 16,000 Marines, and enough firepower to crack a moon. We did not come all this way to leave empty-handed. The Velans asked for help, and we are going to give it to them. Now you have 2 choices. You can leave peacefully, or you can leave in pieces. Either way, you are leaving. You have 1 hour to decide. The channel closed. Thraka stared at the display showing the human fleet in perfect battle formation. 47 ships. For strangers. Against all logic and self-interest, something ancient in his predator's brain whispered a warning. These humans were not naive fools. They were something far more dangerous. They were zealots who believed in principles more than profit. And zealots, history had taught him, were willing to die for their beliefs. Commander Thraka let the full hour pass, using every minute to position his fleet into the traditional Kresh battle formation. His 12 warships formed a wall between the humans and the planet below, their weapons charged and shields at maximum. The formation had served the Kresh for thousands of years. It was a demonstration of strength, unity, and unbreakable resolve. The humans did not respond in kind. Their fleet spread out in what appeared to be complete chaos. Ships moved independently, breaking from formation and repositioning seemingly at random. Some accelerated directly toward the Kresh line. Others drifted sideways. A few even moved backward. What are they doing? Thraka demanded, staring at the tactical display. This is madness. They have no formation at all. His tactical officer shook his head in confusion. I cannot predict their movement patterns, Commander. They are not following any known combat doctrine. Then they are fools, Thraka snarled. All ships open fire. The Kresh fleet unleashed a devastating barrage of plasma torpedoes and particle beams, enough firepower to cripple any traditional battle line. The weapons streaked through space toward the human ships and missed. Almost all of them missed. The human vessels moved like nothing the Kresh had ever seen. They did not attempt to tank damage with their shields in the traditional manner. Instead, they dodged, weaved, and spun through space with an agility that should have been impossible for ships of their size. Point defense systems shot down the few torpedoes that came close, and the particle beams splashed harmlessly against angled shields positioned at the last possible second. How are they moving like that? Thraka roared. Those are capital ships, not fighters. Before his tactical officer could answer, the human fleet returned fire. Kinetic rounds, electromagnetic railgun shots moving at a significant fraction of light speed, slammed into the Kresh shields. The Kresh had encountered kinetic weapons before and generally dismissed them as primitive. Shields were designed to disperse energy weapons, but they also worked against physical projectiles. What the Kresh had not anticipated was the sheer volume and velocity of human kinetic fire. Thousands of rounds poured from the human ships, overwhelming the shield generators through simple mathematics, where energy weapons delivered heat and radiation that shields could deflect. Kinetic rounds delivered pure momentum. Each impact pushed the Kresh ships backward, disrupting their formation and throwing off their targeting solutions. Then the human energy weapons joined the assault. Laser batteries, plasma cannons, and something the Kresh sensors could not immediately identify, cut through the weakened shields and began carving into armor, shields failing on the crushing fang, an officer reported. The Blood Drinker has lost maneuvering thrusters. The Night Terror is reporting casualties. Thraka gripped his command throne hard enough to leave claw marks in the metal. This was impossible. His fleet should have been dominating these primitive newcomers. Instead, they were being torn apart by tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. The humans deployed attack craft, small one-pilot ships that swarmed around the larger Kresh vessels like insects. They moved independently, each pilot seemingly making their own decisions about targeting and movement. There was no coordination that the Kresh sensors could detect, yet they worked together with terrifying efficiency. One group of human attack craft focused their fire on the shield generators of the crushing fang until the shields collapsed entirely. The moment the shields failed, a human frigate accelerated directly toward the now vulnerable cruiser. "Commander," the tactical officer screamed. "The human frigate is on a collision course with the crushing fang." "They are not decelerating." Thraka watched in horror as the human frigate smashed into the Kresh cruiser at tremendous speed. The impact tore both ships apart in a brilliant explosion that lit up the darkness of space. "Did they just suicide?" Thraka whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "Did they just deliberately destroy themselves to take out one of our ships?" "Sensors detect multiple escape pods ejecting from the human frigate before impact," the intelligence officer reported. "The crew evacuated seconds before collision. It was a calculated sacrifice of the ship, not the crew." "Who does that?" Thraka shouted. "Who throws away a perfectly functional warship?" The answer came from the human fleet. Another message broadcast across all channels. "This is Admiral Chen. Commander Thraka, you were warned. We are not playing by your rules. We are not fighting for glory or honor or territory. We are here to protect innocent people from predators like you. And we are very good at killing predators." The battle continued for another hour and 17 minutes. The Kresh fought with the desperation of beings who suddenly realized they had vastly miscalculated. But human tactics were unlike anything in the galactic military databases. They did not stand and trade fire like civilized species. They moved constantly, attacked from unexpected angles, and showed no concern for traditional combat honor. When a Kresh captain attempted to surrender his damaged ship, the humans accepted immediately and sent medical teams to help evacuate wounded Kresh crew members. When another Kresh captain tried to kamikaze his dying ship into a human dreadnought, the humans simply destroyed the bridge with a precise laser strike and boarded the vessel to save the crew in the lower decks. They fought like demons, but showed mercy, like saints. It was a combination that the Kresh psychology could not process. By the time Commander Thraka realized his fleet was doomed, only 3 Kresh ships remained functional. His flagship was crippled, drifting in space with main power offline and life support failing. The boarding pods attached to his hull with metallic clangs that echoed through the dying ship. Thraka drew his ceremonial blade and prepared to die fighting, as all Kresh commanders did when facing defeat. The human marines cut through the blast door with plasma torches and flooded into the bridge. Thraka charged at the first one through the door. His blade raised high. The human moved with shocking speed, deflecting the blade with an armored forearm and delivering a strike to Thraka's throat that left him gasping on the floor. The marine pointed a weapon at his head, then spoke in perfect Kresh language. "Stay down, Commander. We are not here to kill you unless you make us." Thraka stared up at the human through the clear faceplate of the combat helmet. The creature's face was strange, flat and soft-featured, but its eyes held an intensity that Thraka recognized. This was a predator just like him. "Why?" Thraka gasped. "Why did you come?" "What do the Velans have that is worth 47 warships?" The marine tilted his head slightly. "They have nothing we want, Commander. They needed help. That was enough." Below, on the surface of Kepler 442, Elder Chitin Sage watched the battle through the colony's sensors with a mixture of awe and terror. The humans had defeated a Kresh fleet in barely 2 hours, using tactics and technology that seemed impossible. And now, according to communications, human marines were landing at the colony entrance. Chitin Sage gathered his courage and went to meet them. The doors to the colony opened and he stepped out into the dim light of the setting sun. A dozen human figures in combat armor stood in a semicircle, their weapons lowered but ready. One of them stepped forward and removed her helmet. Chitin Sage saw a human face for the first time. The creature had dark skin, short dark hair, and eyes that seemed to hold both kindness and steel. "Elder Chitin Sage," the human asked in perfect Velan language. "I am Captain Maria Santos of the Earth Marine Corps. We received your distress call. I apologize for the delay. Are your people safe?" Chitin Sage felt his legs weaken. He had prepared for conquerors, for opportunists, for beings who would demand payment for their services. Instead, this human warrior stood before him and apologized for not arriving sooner. "You came," he whispered. "You actually came." Captain Santos smiled, and Chitin Sage saw something in that expression that made his heart ache. It was genuine warmth, completely without calculation or hidden agenda. "Of course we came, Elder. You asked for help." Behind Captain Santos, Chitin Sage could see more humans moving through the colony. Some wore combat armor, establishing a defensive perimeter. Others wore different uniforms with red symbols on them, and they were moving directly toward the medical bay. "What are those humans doing?" Chitin Sage asked nervously. "Medical team," Captain Santos explained. "They are here to treat your wounded. We brought supplies, food, and equipment to help repair your shields. My engineers are already looking at your power generators." "But why? What do you want in return?" Captain Santos looked confused by the question. "Want in return?" "Elder, you were under attack. You needed help. We do not charge people for doing the right thing." Chitin Sage stared at this strange creature from Earth, and for the first time in 3 months, he allowed himself to feel hope. Perhaps the galaxy was about to learn something it had forgotten long ago. 3 days had passed since the battle, and Elder Chitin Sage still could not fully comprehend what he was witnessing. The human Marines had established a defensive perimeter around the colony, their weapons pointed at the stars in case more Kresh ships arrived. Human engineers worked alongside Velan technicians to repair the damaged shield generators. Human medical personnel moved through the colony's hospital, treating wounded Velans with equipment and medicines that were remarkably effective, despite being designed for a completely different biology. The humans had even brought food. Real food, not the recycled protein paste that the Velans had been surviving on for weeks. The humans called it humanitarian aid, though the translation software struggled with the term. The closest Velan equivalent meant gift to those who suffer, but even that did not capture the full meaning. Chitin Sage found Captain Santos in the colony's central plaza, supervising the installation of a new atmospheric processor. The human captain was reviewing a holographic display with one of the Velan engineers, pointing out optimal placement for maximum efficiency. "Captain Santos," Chitin Sage called out. "May I speak with you privately?" "Of course, Elder." Santos handed the datapad to the engineer and followed Chitin Sage to a quiet observation deck overlooking the colony's terraced gardens. For a long moment, Chitin Sage simply stared out at the landscape his people had cultivated over decades. Then he turned to face the human. "I must ask you a question, Captain, and I need you to answer honestly. Why did you come? Please do not tell me again that we asked for help. Everyone in this galaxy knows that nobody helps strangers without expecting something in return. What does Earth want from us?" Captain Santos was quiet for a moment, her strange human face showing an expression that Chitin Sage had learned to recognize as thoughtfulness. "You want the honest answer?" she finally said. "Earth wants nothing from you, Elder. We came because you were in trouble and we could help. That is the entire reason, but that makes no sense." Chitin Sage's antenna vibrated with frustration. "You brought 47 warships across hostile space. You lost a frigate and 73 Marines in the battle. You are spending enormous resources to repair our colony and feed our people. There must be some calculation, some benefit that we are not seeing." Santos sighed and leaned against the railing, looking out at the gardens. "Elder, can I tell you a story about Earth history? If you believe it will help me understand. About 80 years ago, before we achieved faster-than-light travel, Earth was a mess. We had divided ourselves into hundreds of nations, and we fought constantly over resources, beliefs, and territory. We nearly destroyed ourselves several times. But throughout all that chaos, there were always people who helped others simply because it was right. Doctors who traveled to war zones to treat the wounded. Teachers who educated children in poverty. Volunteers who rescued people from natural disasters. They gained nothing from these actions except the knowledge that they had made a difference. Chitin Sage clicked his mandibles skeptically. "Those are individuals, Captain. You are talking about government policy. Governments always act in self-interest." "You would think so, wouldn't you?" Santos smiled sadly. "But when Earth finally unified and joined the galactic community, we discovered something that horrified us. We found a galaxy where the strong dominated the weak, where slavery was tolerated, where species like yours could scream for help and be ignored because helping was not profitable. and we decided that we would not accept that reality. So Earth seeks to conquer the galaxy? To impose your values on others? No, Elder. We seek to offer an alternative. We established the Sapient Rights Protocol 80 years ago, based on human moral philosophy. Most galactic civilizations signed it because it made them look civilized, but nobody actually enforced it. We decided to change that. When someone calls for help, we answer. When someone is being oppressed, we intervene. Not because it benefits Earth, but because it is the right thing to do. Chitin Sage felt his legs weaken, and he sat down on a nearby bench. Captain Santos, do you understand how insane that sounds to galactic ears? The entire structure of galactic civilization is built on mutual self-interest. Every treaty, every alliance, every trade agreement is calculated for maximum benefit. You are describing a philosophy that will bankrupt your species. Maybe, Santos agreed. But we would rather be bankrupt and moral than wealthy and complicit in evil. Before Chitin Sage could respond, Vespa came running onto the observation deck, her antennae waving frantically. Elder. Captain, we are receiving multiple transmissions from across the galaxy. The news of the battle has spread. Everyone wants to know about Earth and the humans. The next hours were chaotic. Messages poured in from dozens of civilizations. Some were curious, some were alarmed, some were angry. The Kresh Dominion sent a formal demand for reparations, claiming that Earth had attacked their ships without provocation and demanding compensation for the destroyed vessels. The most significant message came from the assembled councils, the closest thing the galaxy had to a central government. They demanded that human representatives travel to the council homeworld to explain their actions and their intentions. 5 days later, Ambassador David Okafor arrived at the colony aboard a human diplomatic vessel. He was an older human with dark skin and gray hair, and he carried himself with a quiet dignity that reminded Chitin Sage of ancient scholars from Velan history. Elder Chitin Sage, Ambassador Okafor said with a respectful bow, I am here to formally establish diplomatic relations between Earth and the Velan people, if you are willing. Ambassador, we have nothing to offer Earth in return. Our colony is poor, our resources limited. We cannot repay you for what you have done. We do not require repayment, Elder. However, if you are willing, Earth would like to establish a joint research station here. Your terraforming technology is remarkable, and we believe we could learn much from your people. In exchange, we would provide defense and trade access to Earth's markets. Chitin Sage stared at the human ambassador. You want to learn from us? But we are pacifists. We have no military knowledge to share. Elder, Okafor said gently, Earth has plenty of military knowledge. What we lack is wisdom in living peacefully. Your people have mastered something we still struggle with. That is worth more to us than any weapon. The formal agreement was signed that evening. It was the first official alliance between Earth and another species, and the news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Other species began reaching out to Earth. Quietly at first, through secret channels and encrypted messages, small species, weak species, oppressed species that had been ignored by the major powers for centuries. They all asked the same question, would Earth help them too? And Earth's answer was always the same, yes. 2 weeks after the battle, Ambassador Okafor traveled to the assembled councils to face the judgment of the galactic powers. The council chamber was enormous, with representatives from 200 species seated in concentric circles around a central platform. Chancellor Vortis, a towering crystalline being from the Silicon Collective, spoke first. Ambassador Okafor, Earth has violated numerous protocols by intervening in the Kepler 442b situation. You attacked Kresh vessels without formal declaration of war. You provided military aid to a species with whom you had no formal alliance. You have destabilized regional power structures. What do you have to say for yourself? Okafor stood calmly on the platform, his hands clasped behind his back. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. Chancellor, Earth's position is simple. We will establish mutual defense pacts with any species that requests our protection. We will respond to distress calls from any sapient beings in danger. We will not tolerate slavery, genocide, or forced subjugation of civilian populations. These principles are non-negotiable. The chamber erupted in shouts and protests. Species that profited from slavery or conquest roared their objections. Even some of the peaceful species seemed alarmed by this declaration. You cannot simply decide to enforce your morality on the galaxy. roared Representative Thraka Prime of the Kresh Dominion, Commander Thraka's superior. You are a young species with no right to interfere in affairs that predate your civilization by millennia. I disagree, Okafor said calmly. Slavery is not a cultural practice we must respect. It is a crime against sapient beings. Genocide is not a political matter open to debate, it is evil. And Earth will not stand by and watch evil triumph simply because opposing it is inconvenient. This is madness, shouted the representative from the Morvani Empire. You will bankrupt yourselves trying to police the galaxy. You will make enemies of every powerful species. Earth will be destroyed. Perhaps Okafor agreed. But we will be destroyed standing for something we believe in. Can all of you say the same? The chamber fell silent. Then Elder Chiton Sage, who had been granted permission to speak as a witness, stood from his seat in the gallery. Honored representatives, he began, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. For 3 months my people cried out for help. We sent distress signals to every species in this chamber, and you all were silent. Some of you acknowledged our transmissions but declined to help. Others simply ignored us. We were going to die, and not one of you cared enough to intervene. He paused. His anten 6 months had passed since the battle above Kepler 442b, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Velen colony had transformed into a thriving joint research station. Human engineers worked alongside Velen scientists, sharing knowledge and building technologies that neither species could have developed alone. The population had tripled as Velens from other worlds came to see the place where everything had changed. They came to see the species that had answered their call when no one else would. Captain Maria Santos stood in the newly constructed memorial garden at the center of the station. 73 names were carved into a wall of polished stone, one for each Marine who had died defending people they had never met. The names were written in both English and Velen script, and fresh flowers were placed at the memorial every day by Velen colonists who wanted to honor the fallen. She was not alone. Elder Chiton Sage stood beside her, as he often did these days. The old Velen had become something of an ambassador for his species, traveling to Earth several times to speak about the partnership between their peoples. I received interesting news today, Chiton Sage said quietly. The Mylar Collective has formally requested Earth's protection. They are the 17th species to do so. Santos nodded. I heard. The Senate is still debating whether we can actually protect 17 species scattered across half the galaxy. Some people think we are overextending ourselves. Are they right? Santos was quiet for a moment, watching a group of human and Velen children playing together in the gardens. The children had invented a hybrid game that combined elements of both cultures, and they switched between English and Velen language without seeming to notice. Maybe, she admitted, but what is the alternative? Ignore them? Let them suffer because helping is inconvenient? That is not who we want to be, even if it costs you everything. Even then. Before Chiton Sage could respond, Vespa hurried toward them, her antennae vibrating with excitement. Captain! Elder, you need to see this. The news feeds from across the galaxy. They followed her to the communications center, where dozens of screens showed broadcasts from various galactic news networks. The images were stunning. On world after world, protests were erupting. Not protests against Earth, but protests demanding that their own governments adopt human principles. On the Morvani homeworld, millions of citizens marched through the capital demanding an end to their empire's slave trade. On the Silicon Collective's primary station, workers were striking and refusing to produce weapons for aggressive species. Even in the heart of the Kresh Dominion, there were reports of civil unrest as younger Kresh questioned whether conquest was truly their only path. The idea is spreading, Vespa said with wonder in her voice. What Earth did for us has inspired people across the galaxy. They are asking why their own governments did not help. They are demanding change. Santos felt a chill run through her. This could start wars. When you challenge power structures this fundamental, the powerful do not give up peacefully. Perhaps, Chiton Sage agreed. But the alternative is to allow injustice to continue unchallenged. Is that better? The news from the assembled councils confirmed Santos's fears. The galaxy was fracturing into two camps, progressive species that wanted to embrace the sapient rights protocol and enforce it across the galaxy, traditional powers that saw Earth's philosophy as a threat to the natural order of strong species dominating weak ones. Tensions were rising. The Kresh Dominion had begun massing fleets along their borders. The Morvani Empire had recalled their ambassadors from Earth. War seemed inevitable. Then something unexpected happened. The Zilthani arrived. The Zilthani were an ancient species, one of the first to achieve faster-than-light travel millions of years ago. They had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and they rarely involved themselves in galactic politics. Most species viewed them as observers, wise but detached from the concerns of younger races. When their massive world ship appeared in Earth's solar system, every human military vessel went to high alert. The Zilthani vessel was the size of a small moon, containing technology that humanity could barely comprehend. Ambassador Okafor was the one who received their delegation. The Zilthani representative was an ancient being that existed partially in multiple dimensions, appearing as a shifting pattern of light and geometry that hurt to look at directly. Ambassador Okafor, the Zilthani communicated directly into his mind, "We have watched humanity since you achieved faster-than-light capability. We have observed your species with great interest. We are honored by your attention," Okafor said carefully, unsure whether the Zilthani were here as friends or enemies. "We have seen countless species rise in this galaxy. Most follow the same pattern. They achieve technology, they seek resources, they dominate others when possible. They are dominated when they are weak. It is a cycle that has repeated for millions of years. We have long wondered if any species would break this cycle." The Zilthani's form shifted, colors rippling through patterns that Okafor somehow understood represented approval. "Humanity has broken the cycle. You have chosen compassion over profit. You have chosen principle over power. This is unprecedented in our observation of galactic history." "What does that mean for us?" Okafor asked. "It means we will support you. The Zilthani will not fight your wars for you, but we will provide knowledge, technology, and diplomatic support. We will tell the galaxy that Earth's path is worthy of protection, not because we agree with all your choices, but because evolution requires variation. You represent a new way of existing in the galaxy, and such novelty must be allowed to flourish or fail on its own merits." The news of Zilthani support changed everything. Species that had been preparing for war against Earth suddenly reconsidered. The Zilthani were beyond politics, beyond conflict. Their endorsement carried weight that no military force could match. Within weeks, more species began signing mutual defense pacts with Earth, not because they feared human military might, but because they wanted to be part of something different, something better. The Kresh Dominion did not surrender peacefully. Commander Thraka Prime, humiliated by his subordinates' defeat and enraged by Earth's philosophy, launched a massive assault on 3 human-protected worlds simultaneously. The battle was fierce and costly. Earth lost ships and personnel, but they held the line, and more importantly, Kresh civilians began questioning why they were dying to preserve the right to enslave others. Internal divisions within the Dominion grew until the government faced civil war from within. In the end, Thraka Prime was overthrown by his own people. The new Kresh government was not peaceful or benevolent, but they agreed to cease aggressive expansion and honor the Sapient Rights Protocol. It was not perfect, but it was progress. 1 year after the rescue at Kepler 442b, Elder Chiton Sage traveled to Earth for a formal ceremony. The human government was awarding the Velen Star of Hope to every human who had participated in the rescue operation. It was a medal created by the Velens themselves, crafted from crystal that had been grown in the gardens of the colony. Captain Santos stood in formation with thousands of other Marines, soldiers, and crew members in a vast plaza in front of Earth's Unity Hall. Human leaders and representatives from dozens of species watched as each person received their medal. When it was Santos's turn, Elder Chiton Sage himself placed the medal around her neck. The old Velen looked up at her with his multifaceted eyes, and she saw tears forming there. "Thank you," he said simply, "for answering, for coming, for showing the galaxy what we could be instead of what we have been." Santos looked down at the medal, a beautiful spiral of blue crystal that caught the light and fractured it into rainbows. Then she looked past Chiton Sage at the crowd. Humans and aliens stood together watching this ceremony. Children of a dozen species played in the plaza gardens. Representatives from species that had been enemies for centuries were talking peacefully about cooperation instead of conflict. It was not perfect. There were still wars, Still injustice, still species that clung to the old ways. But something fundamental had shifted in the galaxy. The idea that the strong had an obligation to protect the weak, that morality mattered more than profit, had taken root. And ideas once planted were impossible to completely destroy. That evening, Santos returned to the memorial garden on Kepler 442b through a long-range transport. She wanted to see the place where it all began one more time before shipping out to her next assignment. Earth was establishing a defense network across 17 systems now, and she had been chosen to command one of the new stations. She stood before the memorial wall, reading the names of the fallen in the soft light of the setting sun. 73 people who would never go home. 73 people who had died for strangers. But because of their sacrifice, thousands of beings across the galaxy were living free instead of in chains. Millions were living with hope,